What if you were accused of a crime you didn't commit, chased across the country, and the only way to survive was to become a spy? Well, that's exactly what happens in Alfred Hitchcock's Saboteur, a movie that feels like a prototype from everything from Bond to Bourne. So today, we're breaking down this movie, which is one of Hitchcock's most underrated thrillers. It was released in 1942, right in the middle of World War II, and packed with espionage, sabotage, and one of the most iconic climaxes in film history. Welcome back to Cracking the Code of Spy Movies, and today we're asking, is Saboteur secretly one of the most important spy movies ever made? Hi, this is Dan.
And Tom.
So let's start chasing this great story across the country.
All right, wait, Dan. We already did an episode on the 1935 movie, The 39 Steps.
Yeah.
This has a similar feel, so what's up? And I have to ask this question. I ask it a lot. Is this a spy movie? Quite honestly, this one feels very different from the movies we normally decode, less like a spy movie and more like just an action thriller.
All right.
So
look, yeah.
let me understand that.
Sure, if the 39 Steps is a spy movie, which it was, then Saboteur is definitely a spy movie. In both movies, the protagonist isn't a government agent. They are spying nonetheless. And they both have to expose spy networks. And in both movies, the protagonist doesn't have a lot of legal help as they are being chased.
Well, if you were accused of blowing up a factory, Dan, and your only defense was, trust me, I didn't do it.
Yeah, it's not so good, huh?
I don't think historically that would be a strong legal strategy. But
not a good one.
I will agree there's a protagonist who is spying, so let's call it a spy movie.
All right, that's good. It's certainly not a great defense, but it's slightly better in a Hitchcock movie. we've seen the regular citizen get sucked up into spy plots many times in Hitchcock movies. But Tom, here's the thing. This might be one of the most important spy movies people don't talk about.
All right, well, let's fix that.
Yeah, that's it. All right, we got a simple opening. Some military manufacturing facility, looks like airplanes, and a mess hall where the shift is about to get a food break. We have Barry Kane, a factory worker, played by Robert Cummings. He's a regular guy, probably just trying to get through his shift. Instead, he gets framed for sabotage after a fire destroys an aircraft plant. Now, we see the smoke billowing out as a huge fire is roaring. We can see how this type of scenario can play out then and even today with the way warfare unfolds. So this is still a relevant scenario. There's a short inquiry as to what happens, and the bottom line is that the evidence starts to point to Barry Kane. They think he was mixed up with that fire back at the factory. The fire extinguisher that Barry handed to Mason was filled with gasoline. Now, wow. By the way, Hitchcock got one of the electrical crew guys to play Mason because he thought he looked like a working man. Hitchcock was always unconventional. I mean, you got, hey, you, come here. I think, it's like, he was the best boy, I think, in the electrical crew.
Barry hands this guy this fire extinguisher with his gas, and obviously the guy dies. This is definitely not a good look for Barry Kane.
No, it definitely looks like Barry is the saboteur. By the way, saboteur comes from the French sabot, S-A-B-O-T, which means a wooden shoe. And it literally means walking noisily, which more or less was used in a bungling kind of thing. So, and eventually it became something like you were going to use it to sabotage something. So, there you go. Now, a key
but you would be heard walking across the floor with wood.
Yeah, there were rumors that they threw them into the machinery. I don't know if all that's true, but anyway, it comes from the French wooden shoe. A key character in this movie is named Fry, who Barry ran into and who had dropped a $100 bill and other things when they were walking out of the plant for the mess hall. And Fry is Barry's alibi, and he seems to not even work at the plant. What? Barry is starting to suspect Fry now, and he wants to find him. Now, $100 bill this guy dropped, and I think if you look at the shot of all the stuff he dropped on the floor, I think there might be another $100 bill on the floor there too. Now think about that, a $100 bill in 1942. That's probably around $1,500 or more today. So that's a
Well,
lot.
especially for a laborer to be carrying around a couple
Yeah,
of
that's
them.
what I mean. It's a lot to drop. And who is this guy dropping $100 bill? Yeah, exactly. You're working in the factory, and even Barry says, "Wow, that's what one looks like." Yeah. Okay.
Well, and make sure you take note. Fry is the one who gave Barry the gas-filled fire extinguisher before Barry gave it to Mason, the guy who
Yeah, keep
died.
that in mind.
So this person gave it to this person, that person gave it to the next person. The guy in the middle is the one who's screwed.
Yeah. So keep that in mind because that's the setup for the rest of the story. Barry saw on the envelope that Fry dropped that he was Frank Fry from Deep Springs Ranch in Springville.
Okay, so this is the basic setup. It's Barry's word against one of his coworkers. One of his coworkers said, "Oh, I saw Barry give him the fire
Yeah.
extinguisher."
Yeah.
So this is not a great spot to be in, and it would be hard to prove he was innocent in court. Remember, back in 1942, we didn't have surveillance cameras all over the place.
No, right. Exactly. Yeah. So instead of turning himself in, Barry goes on the run, traveling across America to prove his innocence and uncover a larger spy network. There are some really solid performances by people that he meets along the way, like the truck driver that
Oh
he is
yeah,
hitching a ride with. I mean, he was just terrific.
yeah, he really was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yes,
Now
he
he's
was.
credited just as the truck driver. He was played by Murray Alper, who was also in the Maltese Falcon, and this character brought a bit of levity and suspense to some pretty intense scenes.
Yeah. I
He's
mean,
in it multiple times. It's great.
yeah, he is terrific. Hitchcock builds suspense from this point on. Tension. Will Barry get caught? How? And Hitchcock sprinkles in lighter moments, like when Barry is at Deep Springs Ranch, no Fry there, and is keeping an eye on a little girl so she doesn't fall in the pool while the owner is making a call about this Fry guy. You get a little bit of a moment of lightness. These lighter moments turn into serious ones, though.
Oh
Like this
yes,
scene, when the
yep.
girl takes a bunch of envelopes out of the pocket of a jacket sitting there, and one is the envelope that reads, Mr. Frank Fry, Deep Springs Ranch, Springville, California.
Hey, that's
Sounds
the same name
familiar.
he saw on that envelope that Fry dropped earlier in the factory.
Exactly. He opens it, and it says, all finished here. Joining Nielsen in Soda City. Frank. Okay, this is Hitchcock genius at work here. And throughout, we feel we can relax a moment, but no. Barry wants to go to Soda City now to see what's up. And the journey begins.
This is a theme that we're going to see throughout this movie where we see things here that may have been adapted from the 39 Steps that then ends up working its way into this movie and then gets enhanced in other Hitchcock movies. And in this case, this is really gets adapted into one of the most famous Hitchcock scenes, the one in North by Northwest when Thornhill goes to the bus stop in rural Indiana. And
Yeah.
instead of meeting that George Kaplan guy, he gets a run in with a crop duster. But here in Saboteur, there's no bus stop, there's no clandestine meeting with a non existent agent, but we still get Barry heading to what first appears to be an abandoned town.
Yeah, we'll see Barry in trucks, on horses, and more as he moves across the country. Though, well, he doesn't get too far on the horse, though. I have to say. All right. We even see him leaping off a bridge a la Bond in No Time to Die many decades later. This whole river sequence is very well shot. Nice angles and even a waterfall, and even a view from what Barry sees when he's underwater of the detective above looking for him. That was
Yeah,
really a great shot.
yeah, and this is one of those scenes that I think is an enhancement on what Hitchcock did in the 39 Steps. In the 39 Steps, we had that scene with the autogyro. We had he
Yeah.
was running through the glen trying to hide. Hitchcock learned as he had progressed, and even with a similar story, he enhanced the scenes, adding more suspense along the way. So again, this is similar to the 39 Steps, but he's augmented how he did it.
Yeah. And by the way, Barry does run into that truck driver again that we mentioned, who he hitched the ride with earlier and who dropped him off at Deep Springs Ranch. Now, not much time has passed and the truck driver recognizes him. It reminded me a little bit of J.W. Pepper from Live and Let Die when he runs into Bond again in another country in The Man with the Golden Gun. But here, it was basically in the same area. And for some reason, the truck driver helps him out in a big way. Kind of cool.
Yes. So what started as a man on the run story turns into something much bigger, a full-blown espionage conspiracy operating within the United States. And the real culprit might be this guy named Fry, who sounds less like a villain and more like someone who owns a diner. Fry is played terrifically by Norman Lloyd.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm always shocked when I see an actor whom I know from their work when they were older playing a part in the first movie, as Lloyd does here.
Mm-hmm.
My first remembrance of seeing Lloyd was playing Mr. Nolan in Dead Poets Society 47 years after he played Fry. And I didn't recognize him at first. When I realized it was the same actor, I was surprised, and it was kind of like when we talked about Sir Laurence Olivier in our episode on Q-Planes.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen his work, his earlier work, before Marathon Man in 1976. So I didn't know him as a younger actor. I knew who he was, but I didn't realize how much he had physically changed as he aged. Anyways, Lloyd does a great job with this character. The character's well written, and Barry goes on the run. He crosses the country. Of course, he meets a woman named Patricia or Pat Martin. Yep. Now, she initially thinks he's guilty, as they always do, just like in the 39 Steps.
Yeah.
And Patricia's played by Priscilla Lane, just to have enough P alliteration there.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair here, it's somewhat a reasonable assumption, given the evidence or purported evidence against Barry Kane. So we will find out a little bit more.
Yeah, now when we first meet Patricia, it is in one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because this scene starts with Barry meeting Patricia's father, and then she shows up. And I have to believe Mel Brooks saw this scene and decided to spoof it in Young Frankenstein. Because when I saw this thing, my instant reaction was, that's that scene in Young Frankenstein. I don't want to give it away to you, which scene I'm talking about. But once you see it, and if you've seen Young Frankenstein, you'll get what I'm talking about. In Young Frankenstein, it's done as a spoof. It's funny. Here, it's anything but funny.
Yeah.
So then Patricia meets Barry, and she eventually joins him, and suddenly we're in spy thriller mode. And just like this guy who's a factory worker is now caught up in a big spy caper.
Yeah, and again, we all ask, what if that was me? Well, he is on his own, pursuing the truth. Well, maybe Patricia will help. Maybe. But he is against all odds. The Soda City scene is a good one, too. I like that one. It's a very important one. Barry jokes that it's the heart of the bicarbonate belt. All right, so you get one slight light moment there, right? There are a couple of surprises here, too, in this scene with Soda City. So pay attention. It's a great scene.
Yeah, now it's a scene that's going to feel kind of familiar to you. You've seen it in many movies and TV shows, especially Westerns, the way they portray Soda City here. But it is well done.
All right, let's get into the DNA of a spy movie. Let's break this down. This movie quietly reinvents and establishes half the spy genre, right? I mean, we've got innocent man framed, hidden enemy network, cross-country chase, civilian forced into espionage. We have all of that in this movie. In Saboteur, Hitchcock spins another yarn of a regular guy caught up in espionage. Now, remember, Hitchcock had already directed The Man Who Knew Too Much in 1934, The 39 Steps in 1935, Secret Agent in 1936, The Lady Vanishes in 1938, and Foreign Correspondent in 1940. So, he knows exactly what he's doing here.
Well, and if you've seen those earlier movies, so do we.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, obviously, he's
like I say,
guy on the run.
He keeps building on this theme, Hitchcock does.
He does.
Saboteur is really special because there are layers of deceit going on, and we, the viewers, sometimes know more than the characters.
This is where it gets really interesting, because Saboteur isn't just a thriller. It really is kind of laying the groundwork for even modern spy movies. It's like Hitchcock accidentally wrote the instruction manual for spy movies. Not that he would do anything by accident, but it definitely influences many spy movies to come, without question.
Oh, yeah, and he's creating his manual over the life of his movies. So by the time he hits it out of the park with North by Northwest, he has this manual in great shape. And Saboteur was a very important step in the creation of that manual.
Yeah. Even James Bond, who's polished and trained, he owes something to this structure, especially the idea of uncovering a hidden network rather than just stopping one villain. That's basically the blueprint for decades of spy storytelling.
Well, one key difference, though, is Bond swaggers into danger with a martini, where Barry Kane walks into danger like, I really hope this works. Because
Yeah,
Barry's not trained. He's
yeah,
like Hannah in the 39 Steps. He's
yeah.
improvising. And that's what makes this tension feel real and honestly more dangerous than some of the stuff Bond gets into.
Yeah, certainly no martinis for Barry Kane, but Barry's biggest weapon, I think, is his persistence because he never quits. He keeps
Okay,
going.
talking about persistence, we persistently like to shout out to some of our listeners who gave us feedback. So, Dan, what do we have today?
A couple of our listeners gave us feedback on our episode, The Fourth Protocol. Chris Pape Django Bush said, hey, it's very informative. Well done, guys. Keep it going. And James Johnson said, hey, great job. And on our recent episode, I Mean It, from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, we got great feedback from Pietro Rossi, Bernard Abels, and Morgan Lisney. So we have more we will include in upcoming episodes. Thanks, and keep the feedback coming. It helps us produce podcasts that you want to hear. Thank you. Now, here's a little bit of trivia. A great behind-the-scenes kind of fact. Hitchcock originally wanted bigger stars for the leads.
Of
But
course he did.
but the studio pushed for lesser-known actors. Hitchcock actually wanted Gary Cooper or Joel McCrea for the lead role of Barry Kane. And for the female role, he wanted Barbara Stanwyck or Margaret Sullivan. Wow.
I can't see Cooper in the Barry Kane role. That's
Once you
interesting.
see somebody in the role, it's hard to plug, it's like,
Oh, that's
yeah,
true.
okay.
That's true.
It's hard because you get used to it. If you like the guy who's in the role currently, Hitchcock wasn't thrilled, actually. So Universal Studios, over Hitchcock's objections and wishes, cast Robert Cummings and Priscilla Lane. And Universal, I think, made good choices here, as it turned out. But Hitchcock never really liked Cummings as Kane because Hitchcock said he didn't think Cummings was ever serious enough, his expressions he was talking about, because he kind of has that comic kind of face. And he did not like Priscilla Lane all that much either. But I think the casting turned out to be pretty good.
Oh, I agree with you because Barry feels like a regular guy. He's not a movie
Yeah,
star pretending to sweat. And
yeah.
I thought Robert Cummings came off as a natural for this role because he seems to play effortlessly the regular guy role.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's important in this particular movie, too. We're talking about this regular guy, so let's look at how an ordinary man could become a hero. Barry Kane might be Hitchcock's most relatable hero, one we can all feel akin to and connected to, because I think Cummings did do a good job. Cummings pulls it off. And really, in the 1930s and 1940s and beyond, Cummings was kind of considered a light comedian. He had his own show in 1955 called The Bob Cummings Show, and later in 1964, a show called My Living Doll. So you can see his light comedy here in this movie. And I think that really helped identify his character and persona and his likability. So I disagree with Hitchcock here, which, how could you disagree with Hitchcock? But,
Yeah, do it, Dan. Now,
but I do.
I will say Hitchcock loved the idea of having this ordinary person thrown into extraordinary
Concept.
danger.
Yeah, yeah.
And Barry Kane fits that perfectly because he's not a spy. He's
No.
not even particularly skilled really at all. But Cummings doesn't overplay it. So that would be my concern in casting is that you would overplay the I'm a naive whatever.
Yeah.
And I think he does a good job with that.
Yeah, he doesn't overplay. I think he actually pulls it up pretty well. Now, you can compare that to somebody like Jason Bourne, who is trained but doesn't remember it with the amnesia and all that. Barry has none of that, but he is in the game. That's the key here, and he does play it off well.
Well, yeah, Barry is in the game, but for Barry, you have to remember he's constantly one bad decision away from disaster. Although in many spy movies that's true, but you've got somebody who's making decisions without having a clue.
Yeah,
And that's what makes the unfolding of the story much more enjoyable and makes the audience connect as well. You're thinking, what would I do in this situation?
yeah.
And to compare him to Jason Bourne makes an interesting comparison. Yes, Bourne wakes up with amnesia, and he still knows like 40 different ways to disarm someone. But he has muscle memory, if not cognitive memory. His tradecraft is embedded in his being. Here, Barry wakes up and is like, I hope running is enough to get me out of this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no tradecraft in his background. He's a regular guy, right?
Yep. And here's a little more backstory here. It's said that Hitchcock deliberately wrote Barry as bland to make him more universal.
Hmm.
I'm not sure bland is the perfect word, but whatever Hitchcock did, it did make Barry an appealing figure that many could identify with and like.
Yeah, yeah, which is a bold strategy, really, for Hitchcock. Let's make our hero aggressively average. Hey, but look at Fleming. He was looking for a bland, boring name for his spy. Bond, James Bond. Perfect. So there might be something to all of this. All right, let's look at something that isn't always in spy movies. America is the battlefield. Yeah. Here in Saboteur.
Oh, and they really show it to you.
Here in Saboteur, one of the most fascinating aspects of Saboteur is its setting. This isn't Europe. This isn't the distant war zone. This is America. America is turned into a war zone, and not in an obvious way. It's subtle. You've got sabotage happening in everyday places, factories, ranches, small towns. It creates this unsettling idea that espionage isn't over there. It's happening right here in America. And the world today still has these fears. Whatever country you're in, it is very much the East versus the West, and all of this 1942 stuff is happening today all over the world.
Oh, yeah. The timing of this movie is really intriguing. It was released in the U.S. only 4 months after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and when the U.S. officially joined the war. The filming was done from December of 1941 to February 1942. Now, that February date's important. We're going to come back to a little bit later in the episode. But the key thing here is that the movie was approved in 1941, just before Pearl Harbor, just before the U.S. entered the war. So with the battle seemingly happening over there, as you said, it's overseas, this movie shows that espionage around war can happen thousands of miles away from the front.
Anyway.
And sabotage of plant manufacturing war goods in the U.S. definitely can affect what's happening on the battlefield over there.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, even a circus-like group of performers shows up, which feels random, but also very Hitchcock. It may not be Bond in a clown suit, but pay attention to these circus performers. You got interesting dialogues happening there.
Yeah. Here's a bit of trivia on these circus performers. I thought that was a great scene. It is a highlight in the movie in a lot of ways. You got to pay attention to it. That group of performers, some of them were actual sideshow performers, not necessarily actors. Hitchcock used a blend of real specialty performers and actors to create this strange assembly of characters that Barry Kane runs into. And it's a Russell Brothers circus truck caravan. And by the way, you got to look it up. Russell Brothers Circus was a real and successful traveling circus founded in 1928 by Claude Webb and Pauline Webb. It was a prominent truck-mounted show during the 1930s and 40s. And where does Barry run into them? In a truck-mounted show here, where they're traveling by truck. So this is pretty cool. And they were known for their high-quality performances and sometimes featured animal trainers like Clyde Beatty and so on. In fact, according to their website, some of the Russell Brothers circus animals were used in Tarzan movies. So you can find a lot more information on this at russellbrotherscircus.com. But here's Hitch using a real circus and some real performers.
You talk about reality here and using America and what the U.S. has to offer from a movie perspective. Take a look for a dam and what the dam might mean. The dam was what we now call the Hoover Dam. At the time, it was the Boulder Dam. And it provided about 75% of the power to Los Angeles at the time the movie was made. It still provides a lot of LA's power. It also powered defense plants. So we have a movie where we're talking about espionage. We're looking at a picture of the Boulder Dam. What could be happening here? In a movie called Saboteur.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. You pay attention to that. That's in the Soda City scene. There's also a great scene at a wealthy woman's house, Mrs. Henrietta Sutton, played by Alma Kruger. And some of the villains are there, as well as Barry. And there are bookshelves loaded with all kinds of books. And one of the villains, Tobin, says he must pick one out appropriate for Barry. And he
Oh
points to
yeah, this is good.
and he points to one, the death of a nobody. Oh man. I thought that was brilliant. Yeah,
Are we
it could have
are we
easily
saying nobody is Barry, huh?
that could have easily not been written into the script, but it adds so much dimension to the story in one simple moment. And by the way, it was actually a real book, The Death of a Nobody, 1911, by Jules Romains, but it did not portend anything murderous or ominous. But I thought at that moment, boy, that was just perfect story writing and a perfect moment. And it's short and boom, in your face.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, and also in that scene, we get Barry talking to Patricia, and he's trying to point to a book that has the title Escape. So Hitchcock's using these book titles as messages. Sometimes it's not what's said verbally, but what's said visually.
Yeah.
And given that there's a blind person earlier in this movie, that seems quite powerful to me.
Yeah. The dialogue in general, too, I have to say, you got to give kudos to the screenwriters here because the dialogue is very good. There are more good moments as Barry and Patricia are dancing here at the wealthy woman's house. And Patricia says to Barry, "Why couldn't I have met you 100 years ago on a beach somewhere?" Which sounds nice and romantic, right? And what does Barry say? He says, "Bathing suits looked awful funny 100 years ago, but I bet you look beautiful." Oh, it's like,
There's some of the comedic lightness that he brings.
But again, a great line and a great moment. Good dialogue and a moment we can, again, breathe a little bit. Now, there is a little impromptu speech that Barry must give. And it reminded me of Hannah in the 39 Steps, another Hitchcock spy thriller, again, like we mentioned, that came out in 1935. So you'll see it and you'll go, oh, yeah, yeah.
I had that exact same thought about that speech. Again, Hitchcock's building this theme of this unknown person thrown into this situation, and he keeps enhancing it.
Yeah.
Right? So what he says here is, let's add some realism. Let's make it a little chaotic. The speech helps do that. And this is typical Hitchcock and why he's so good.
Yeah.
Now, the speeches do end differently, but they were both used to try to stall and potentially facilitate escape. Oh, there's that book title again, Escape.
Yeah, great stuff. All right, I want to talk about the villains and this hidden network we've been talking about, this hidden spy network. The villains in this movie, I think, are fascinating. Hitchcock always has this unique angle that he brings to his spy movies. I say they're fascinating simply because they're not obvious. They're wealthy, respected, and completely hidden. That idea becomes a staple in spy movies. The enemy isn't obvious, which becomes a major spy trope later on. Think 3 Days of the Condor, Mission Impossible, or even Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Lots. The conspiracy is the real antagonist. And it's good to see and call out the influence that Hitchcock has had on so many more movies to come.
Well, they don't all get to wear Nehru jackets and have physical deformities, do they? Although,
No.
I guess Professor Jordan, he was missing the tip of his finger in the 39 Steps. We don't get that here. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the acting here. Because we mentioned Norman Lloyd's excellent performance as Frank Fry earlier. But there's this other villain who I just absolutely loved.
Yeah, I know.
The actor Otto Kruger plays a character named Charles Tobin. And if his performance doesn't send chills down your spine, you and I live in a different world. This character was great. And Dan, as you said, the villains aren't obvious. And he's really worth calling out here because, for me, he steals every scene he's in.
Yeah, he was absolutely stunning in this movie. All right, let's get to the Statue of Liberty climax time.
Okay, so let's talk about that ending, the Statue of Liberty sequence. It's iconic. If you study Hitch, you've seen at least a picture of this scene. And it's slightly terrifying if you're afraid of heights. And Dan, you know, heights aren't top of my list, right? So the Statue of Liberty sequence is one of Hitchcock's most famous set pieces. A fight at the top of the statue. There's a man hanging from Lady Liberty's hand. It's suspense built on pure visual storytelling.
Yeah.
And Hitchcock is a master of this. You're going to enjoy the sequence and the action and Norman Lloyd's performance. And it's symbolic too, because freedom itself becomes the battleground. Think about the impact of the visual of the Statue of Liberty and what it means to freedom in the United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah.
This is a movie about a German attempt to sabotage things here in the United States, and you can't end up with a better representation for that than the Statue of Liberty. Let's take a peek behind the curtains here, a behind the scenes look. And you know what? I know this is going to be surprising. We discover that this wasn't filmed on the actual Statue of Liberty.
Oh, really? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
It was a massive studio recreation combined with matte paintings and optical effects. But for me, I thought it looked pretty darn good.
It did look
And
good.
the hand and the arms were recreated to scale on a Universal Pictures
To
soundstage.
scale. To scale.
To
That's
scale.
pretty good.
Exactly.
That's
Now,
pretty good.
we know, I keep talking about how this is building on things. Years later, when Hitchcock did North by Northwest, they were climbing all over Mount Rushmore. And we were wondering, how'd they get away with that? Well,
Yeah.
now we know. The stage was set here in 1942 with Saboteur because the climbing scenes in Rushmore were on a set as well. Now, originally, this scene was supposed to end in a theater, similar to what Hitchcock did in the 39 Steps. But they changed it, and this time he brought in probably the biggest symbol of the U.S. other than a U.S. flag.
Yeah. And really, for 1942, this recreation of the Statue of Liberty, the parts that they used, it looks incredible. It's just terrific.
Yep.
Now, let's look at some of the continuity or some of the logic fun, because there's some issues here.
Continuity errors in a movie, shocking.
But I have to point out, as much as I like the whole Statue of Liberty climax here in Saboteur, I have to ask a few questions. Let's be honest. How did they get up there so easily? The security situation at the Statue of Liberty in this movie is, at best, questionable. I mean, they're
And
walking all over the place.
we weren't in the war yet. Security throughout the country back then is not what it is today.
Yeah.
I totally buy that you would have been able to do that.
Oh, I don't know. Getting up into the arm and everything. I don't know. And then we have Barry Kane, by this point in the movie, on the run for so long. Literally, he goes from this obviously exhausted figure to skilled and efficient climber of a national monument in pretty short order. I mean, come on.
Adrenaline is a powerful thing.
It is. It must have really kicked in here for Barry.
Yeah.
Now we've done like 8 Alfred Hitchcock spy movie decoding sessions already, and this is our 9th. So let's flip the page and talk a little about Alfred Hitchcock's style here in Saboteur.
So this is Hitchcock in full control. It's peak Hitchcock technique. He's got suspense over surprise, and sometimes the surprise does add to the suspense.
Yeah.
It's visual storytelling at its best. He puts ordinary people in danger, which involves the viewer, because we can really think, what if that was me?
Yeah.
And the real focus is on tension, not the specifics of the sabotage. So let's shift gears here and talk about a few lighter elements in the movie, like Hitchcock's cameo. We know that Hitchcock likes to appear somewhere in all of his movies. He always does a cameo.
Yeah, he does. And we also know John Glenn, who directed 5 James Bond movies, For Your Eyes Only, Octopus, The View to Kill, The Living Daylights, and License to Kill. He used pigeons or birds as his signature technique to create sudden scares or tense moments, often during quiet scenes. And it worked well. So here we have Hitchcock making his cameo in Saboteur in 1942. Yeah.
So where are we going to find him? He
Yeah.
appears about an hour and 5 minutes into the movie. Remember, this is one of his earlier movies. He started putting his cameos earlier in the movies after this because
Yeah.
people were like, where's Hitch? Where's Hitch?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
here in this one, he's standing outside a drugstore with a woman. He's on the left, and as always, he appears, he reminds you he's there, and then he disappears like a cinematic ghost. Poof, he's gone and not seen again.
Yeah.
But there's a backstory to this cameo that makes me laugh. Hitchcock wanted to do this as a longer cameo. The woman he was with was going to be deaf. So Hitchcock was going to use sign language to talk to her. Anyways, he supposedly wanted to sign something offensive to her and have her slap him.
Okay. All right.
The studio said no. Now, I have a deaf relative, and I would have loved to see and interpret what he was going to sign to her.
Yeah.
There's a
yeah.
community out there that would have absolutely enjoyed it. So it's too bad it got cut.
Yeah, I wonder if there are any scraps lying around somewhere that we could find. That would be interesting.
That
Yeah.
would be interesting because I would really like to say what he supposedly said to her.
Yeah.
Now, there are a few continuity errors and minor quirks to look for. And they're always a lot of fun to find. And for the Bond movies, we've got lots of episodes out on these things, 20 things you missed in whatever movie. So, Dan, let's have some fun. Why don't you start to talk about some continuity errors?
All right. Yeah. And before that, we're going to give a shout out to Tony Lee Morrell, who's 4 books written on Hitchcock. And they're all terrific. So, and one of them is on storyboards, which would really fit in with all of the stuff we're talking about here on Hitchcock. So look for Tony Lee Morrell.
Yeah, and we've got 2 episodes where we've got him in talking about the Hitchcock movies.
Yeah, there you go. Those are great to listen to. All right. So here you're talking about some continuity issues there, Tom. All right. I did notice one.
You mean it's not all Bond?
And it's not unique to this movie, but, Barry's injuries seem to heal at record speed. I mean, this is like Star Trek tricorder or dermal regeneration stuff that you see. I mean, injuries appear, then boom, disappear. It's nice. And I also think Hitchcock was onto something. The original action hero rule. If you don't mention the injury again, it no longer exists. We see this in Bond, Bourne, Mission Impossible, everywhere now.
That's good.
And also notice that the travel times across the U.S. are, for 1942, a bit optimistic. Like Barry travels from California to New York by car, train, and he's on the run in what seems like a couple of days. Hey, well, wait. Maybe he's using another Star Trek device here. I don't know. The transporter, maybe?
Wow.
But hey, the movie is only like 1 hour and 49 minutes, so, I mean, he's got to move fast.
Dan, we've talked about it often. It's movie magic for both of those things.
All right.
Now, I also like, and the same thing happened in the 39 Steps, I like how Patricia goes from, I'm turning you in, to, I'm going to help you overthrow a spy ring. And she does that pretty quickly.
Yes.
And that would be called, I guess, plot acceleration. Like you said,
that's a good word.
The movie's less than 2 hours, so you do have to get a lot of this stuff done quickly.
Yeah. And I think if you look at Hitchcock's works and his methodologies, he does prioritize suspense over realism. So if bending logic made the scene a little more thrilling, I think he did it. And really, we're happy that he does. I mean, he bent and twisted a lot of logic. And we enjoy it all, though. So that's good. Now, cinematography. I want to give a shout out to the cinematography. Joseph A. Valentine is the cinematographer in this movie, Saboteur. Throughout, I think the cinematography is crisp, it's interesting, it's intriguing, it's clean, and it grabs you. The use of light.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, the use of light throughout this movie is just fantastic. Darks, shadows, illuminated faces, sun, nighttime. It's just all terrific. Valentine has worked on plenty of good movies like Rope, Shadow of a Doubt, Wolfman, 1941, just to name a few. His work adds to this Hitchcock mystique, and I think it enhances the movie. We mentioned the escape scene on the river with the truck driver's help, and there are other scenes that are very well done. Look for the rainy scene of the cabin in the woods. And it is so well done. A nice reveal there, and you can feel the rain and the dampness all around. This is the cabin of Philip Martin, by the way, and he composes on the piano, though he lives alone, and has a great line about his compositions. He says, and there's no one to tell me my results are anything but brilliant. So I live in a comfortable glow of self-appreciation. That is just great.
Yeah,
right?
that really is.
Yeah.
Now, this scene he's in is where we first meet Patricia Martin.
Yes.
Who happens to be Philip's niece. The camera work here is fantastic. You
Yes.
almost feel like you're there.
Yeah.
Now, another scene to look out for is the fan blade scene, where Barry is trying to cut off his handcuffs because he's been handcuffed.
Yeah.
And the music with this, it really adds to the tension. It's shot well, and the music just takes it over the top.
Yeah, we'll give a shout out to the music too. Now, we mentioned the circus scene already, and that one is also brilliantly shot. You got to notice when you're looking at this scene, the lighting, a perfect combination of shadows and light in this very important night scene. The camera angles, close-ups, wide shots, outside and inside shots, all perfect. Some good dialogue here as well, and Patricia Martin is a snake charmer, according to the bearded woman, to fool the police. The police walk off and one says, "A snake charmer? Well, well, you never can tell about a woman." I thought, okay, all right. I'm not going to read anything else into this thing, but I thought it was good writing again.
Yeah, that was. Now, you talked about this scene in that wealthy woman's mansion with the party where he gives gives a speech. There's this great sweeping shot at the mansion from the top of the steps down into the crowd. And we see a similar shot later in Notorious, another Hitchcock spy movie. Again, continuing to build on. Another shot that would become very important in cinematic history starts in Saboteur. To me, this shot was the beginning of one of Hitchcock's most famous filming techniques, which is called the dolly zoom, the Hitchcock zoom, or the vertigo zoom.
Yes.
In Saboteur, it's not technically a dolly zoom, but there's a scene when somebody falls.
Yes.
And the effect that they used for that appears to be the birthplace of the dolly zoom, at least to me. The actor is on a saddle-type chair when they shot it. And so he's like waving around like he's falling.
Yes.
And the effect was created by having the camera pull up. So the actor isn't really falling, but you feel like he's falling because the camera's going up.
Extremely well done.
Yeah, so the camera creates the illusion. Now, in the dolly zoom in Vertigo, it took that technique of having this camera pulling back, and in Vertigo, they zoom in. So you really get this distortion. But I think that if Hitch hadn't figured out how to do this with this character looking like he's falling, I don't know that you would have had the dolly technique in Vertigo.
Yeah.
Because they build on each other.
Yeah, and there's another great shot in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. That's important. It's a very important shot. Again, we're talking about sabotage here and things happening in the United States, in America. There's going to be a new Navy ship launched, the U.S. Alaska, which, by the way, was a real ship in real life. This was not the U.S. Alaska. This is a target for the saboteurs. And there's an explosion. And they actually show a ship that listed and fell over on its port side into the water at Brooklyn Navy Yard. In actuality, Hitchcock, in order to add a shocking and realistic touch,
which it was,
included actual footage of the ship, the SS Normandy, which actually did capsize in New York Harbor that year due to a severe onboard fire and all the water that was used to put out the fire. And the U.S. Navy was not thrilled about Hitchcock using this because the ship capsized because of fire and stuff, not sabotage. And they were very, very unhappy with the implications there. So, again, Hitchcock does what he wants.
Well, this clip you're talking about that Hitchcock added is the thing that I alluded to earlier when I talked about pay attention to February 1942.
Yeah.
So the SS Normandy, which was renamed to the Lafayette 2 months earlier, sank on February 9th, 1942. And Hitchcock got lucky here. He had about a month and a half to get that footage into the movie and how he was going to use it.
You'll discover throughout this movie that the cinematography is so well done that this movie received one Academy Award nomination, and that was for Best Cinematography, Black and White, for Joseph Valentine. And you get some landmarks, right? You got Rockefeller Center, you got Radio City Music Hall, you got the Hoover Dam that we mentioned, and of course, the Statue of Liberty. Now, again, let's look at the casting. We mentioned the casting as we're going along. Universal got it right with Robert Cummings and Priscilla Lane, I think. And Norman Lloyd as Fry, outstanding. Supporting crew, solid, and enhances the story. Priscilla Lane, who played Patricia Martin, played Elaine Harper in Arsenic and Old Lace, a fabulous movie. Norman Lloyd is a fine actor who has been in many movies, including the 1989 Dead Poets Society. The actor who plays Philip Martin, the man in the cabin on that rainy night, is Vaughn Glasser. Tremendous. He was also in Those Were the Days, Meet John Doe as the governor, and Arsenic and Old Lace as Judge Coleman. So I think the casting worked out great.
Yeah, that supporting cast works really well here. Yeah, so don't forget, we've mentioned these already. We've got Murray Alper, who played that truck driver, who did a great job.
Great. Yeah,
the whole cast from the circus really did a great job here as well. I think that whole concept of, and Hitchcock always does this well, the casting of the supporting roles, they just nail it.
Yeah. All right, let's look at the music just for a second. Frank Skinner was the composer here for Saboteur. This guy did Harvey, Arabian Nights, House of Seven Gables, and lots more. The music here is good. There are some moments like a waterfall scene where the music matches the flow of the waterfalls. I thought that was a terrific shot. Overall, I thought it was well-used background music and matched the scenes well.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think it enhanced, it didn't overpower.
Yeah. All right, let's look at a few connections and the legacy of this movie. When you look at spy movie history, Saboteur sits in a really interesting place. It bridges early espionage movies and the Cold War thrillers that come later. And you can draw a straight line from Saboteur to North by Northwest that we mentioned earlier, which is basically Hitchcock refining this exact same formula.
Well, to me, that's the most interesting thing about this movie, because we can watch as Hitchcock is learning, he's refining, he's honing how to make a spy movie. And especially if you've seen the earlier works and then the later works, this is right in the middle. And it builds on the earlier works and gives Hitchcock a great stepping stone for some of his most famous spy movies.
Yeah, and you can see echoes of this in everything, even in modern spy movies and spy franchises. Now, even the wrong man on the run formula keeps coming back, and beyond that, this DNA shows up everywhere.
Okay, so that's the legacy, Dan. What about this movie today still holds up?
I think the pacing, the tension, and the core idea that anyone can be pulled into espionage surely holds up. And actually, the paranoia feels modern. We see it today. Lots of friction in the world between superpowers and many other countries going on right now. And the idea of hidden enemies within society? That hasn't aged at all. We're all paranoid about that today.
Okay, so is Saboteur one of the most important spy movies ever made?
I don't know. It may not be the most famous, but definitely it's one of the most influential. It helped define the DNA of the genre. Perfect? No, it's not perfect. Not really. Essential? Yeah, I think 100% essential. And without it, the spy movie landscape might look a little different, I think.
So this 1942 Hitchcock movie, which captures so much of the essence of sabotage and espionage, that it's still relevant today. It's still powerful, and the themes are still powerful. And that's entertaining. And it did give us one of the most memorable endings in classic cinema.
Yes, it did. All right, let us know what you think. Does Saboteur deserve more love? Until next time, we'll keep cracking the code of spy movies. Be a field operative with us. Subscribe and discover more. And remember, in the world of espionage, trust no one except us. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.